The first official world chess champion, Wilhelm Steinitz, was renowned for his innovative play and deep understanding of chess strategy. One of his signature weapons was the Vienna Gambit, an aggressive opening that tests the limits of both players' tactical and positional skills. We'll be exploring 6 of Steinitz's most remarkable games in the Vienna Gambit, showcasing his unique approach and revealing the secrets behind his success. Get ready to delve into the mind of a chess legend and discover the power of the Vienna Gambit in the hands of a true chess master. In the first game, Steinitz takes on Gustav Neumann, a strong German chess master. Steinitz kicks off with e4 and Neumann replies e5. White continues with knight c3, the Vienna game, which aims to control the center and prepare for a quick f4 pawn push. Black develops his knight to f6, and we have entered the Falkbeer variation. Now Steinitz plays the aggressive f4, marking the Vienna Gambit. White offers a pawn in order to weaken Black's control of the center. Black responds with the main move d5, challenging White's center. Steinitz maintains the tension with d6. Black captures the e4 pawn and the game heats up. White doesn't want to open the d file because either his king will go uncastled or he'll lose the d pawn. So he takes Black's e pawn, which also kicks the knight away from the defense of e4. So White takes that pawn and Black also takes White's pawn. Now the position seems to be even, but Steinitz pushes forward with d4, attacking the knight and gaining more central control. Next comes knight f3, developing the king side. Black plays queen e2, attacking and pinning the knight to the king. This looks incredibly dangerous for White. Steinitz plays bishop d3, defending, but here comes f4, and it looks like White is in a lot of trouble. He plays bishop g5, attacking the queen, but this isn't just a routine attack. It takes control of a vital diagonal, preventing Black from castling queenside. Plus, with no f-pawn, it's really difficult to dislodge this bishop, and h6 would create too many light square weaknesses around the king. After queen e6, White castles. Black wins the knight, White recaptures, and you of course know that Black can't take this bishop because it would lose the queen to the pin. So Black plays bishop d6, thinking about castling kingside. But Steinitz says, no way, knight e5, and your king is staying right where it is. Black takes the knight with his bishop, White recaptures, and actually threatens checkmate on d8. Knight c6 does not work because White would take it with check. So Black plays knight e7. Then Steinitz plays queen h5, pinning the knight. And now White has the ruthless plan of playing rook a to d1, bishop to d5, and going for checkmate. And Black can't really move much. If he tries to untangle by moving his knight forward, then rook d1 comes with tempo, and he'll eventually get crushed. And this is just one of these examples, where this actually leads to checkmate. So Black plays knight f8 to try to coordinate his pieces. White threatens checkmate with rook a to d1, and so we see bishop d7 cutting that off. White's position is so dominant that Steinitz then plays h3 and king h1 just to stop any of Black's counterplay. And if you have any better suggestions of how Black should have played here, then comment them down below because I couldn't think of anything. Steinitz proceeds with e6, a pawn sacrifice, aiming to open lines around the king, and follows with rook d2, planning to double rooks. Now we have a weird couple of moves. a5 and b3 and a4, which I can't really explain. It's like the players completely forgot what was going on in the rest of the board and suddenly decided to push some queenside pawns. By the way, there's going to be a few more of these weird sequences throughout the other games. Finally, Steinitz doubles his rooks on the d-file, which threatens a nice combination that leads to checkmate. For example, if Black plays a3, this is that combination that will eventually lead to checkmate like this. Queen takes f5. Black tries bishop d7, but White just takes it. Now rook e7 is checkmate, which can only be stopped by queen e6. But then White would win a bunch of material like this. And the rook can't go to f8 because queen takes g6 and rook e7 is checkmate. And Black can't take the rook because of this other checkmating combination. Queen e7. So black resigns. In this exciting game between Steinitz and Max Lange, we witness Steinitz's aggressive play and tactical prowess in action. The game opens with the Vienna game, this time with knight c6, which is the Max Lange defense. Steinitz plays f4, black develops his bishop to c5, maintaining the tension in the center. White takes the e-pawn, and black plays an interesting move. Bishop takes g1. After the rook recaptures, the h-pawn is left undefended, so queen h4 can grab a pawn like this. But there is an issue with this plan, and Steinitz exploits it. Rook g2 forces the queen back to h6. d4 not only takes full control of the center, it discover attacks the queen, which sidesteps to g6. Steinitz continues developing his pieces, including bishop f4 and bishop to d3. Black's next move, b5, is an aggressive pawn push, looking for counterplay on the queen side. But it also completely hangs the pawn. And Steinitz doesn't even take it. He actually never takes it. Who knows, maybe black actually played b6 and this was a typo in my database. What's funny is that if black took the b-pawn, it would also defend d4. But his actual move, queen f3, hangs d4, which black also does not take. he castles. White castles queenside. Black plays f6, challenging white's center. White takes it, and after queen f6, pushes forward with e5, so black moves the queen to e6. Now it looks like d5 forks the queen and knight, but black would have knight takes e5 with the counterpunch, and there's a pin on that bishop. So instead, Steinitz plays rook h1, putting the rook on that semi-open h-file. Black plays knight a5, building an attack on the queen side. And the rook shouldn't be taken because black would win the material back. So white plays queen e4, lining up a battery towards the king side. Black can't defend with the queen because then white can take the rook for free. And if you were to play g6, then you're just hanging the knight. So black plays knight f5, and white attacks the pinned piece with g4. Black counterattacks with d5, and white plays en passant, right? Wrong. Queen takes f5, sacrificing the queen. So white has all sorts of attacking moves here. Bishop h6, doubling the rooks. Steinitz starts with e6. And black has no other option but to take it, since otherwise, say queen f8 for example, white's pieces would just swarm the king, and this is really hard to defend. So black takes the pawn. Steinitz doesn't even take the bishop back. He plays bishop e5 with a threat on g7. Black hopelessly plays g6, and white snatches the pawn. At this point, I think we can all see that white is completely winning regardless of black's response, but let's see Steinitz's brilliant conversion. After queen f3, white takes the pawn and then makes a queen. He checks with his rook and does not let the king escape, sacrificing the exchange, enabling the delivery of an awesome checkmate. In this game, the legendary Steinitz plays an unknown opponent during a simultaneous exhibition. We enter the Vienna game and black chooses the Falkbeer variation before Steinitz offers the gambit. Black continues with the aggressive d5, which white takes. This allows black to gain some space with his e-pawn. White adds an attacker with queen e2. Black plays bishop g4, attacking the queen, but this actually helps white out because the queen can move out of the way of the bishop, and the only good way for black to defend his e-pawn is to put the bishop back on f5. So black could have gone bishop f5 in one move, but instead gave white the free chance to move the queen. Steinitz plays bishop c4, defending his own advanced pawn. Black develops a knight, and white develops his own knight in a fancy manner, taking advantage of that pin. Black develops his bishop with tempo. White blocks it with d4, and black wishes en passant were possible, but again, there's that pin. Black castles, which means no more pin. Steinitz has to play knight h4, and now there's a double attack on two pieces. Black would be completely lost if not for this one move, knight g4, attacking the queen. and opening up a discovered attack on the knight. Queen g3 meets both threats. Black takes the d pawn, giving up his light squared bishop. But there is bishop f2, leading to this position where white has 2 bishops and a knight for the queen. Technically, this means material is even, but this position is very dynamic and could go either way. We see knight b6 hitting the bishop, so it retreats. Then g6, forcing the knight to return as well. a5 threatens to trap the bishop, so a4 prevents it. Then f5, cementing black's passed pawn. Steinitz continues bishop e3, and boy, that diagonal looks delicious. Black plays h6, giving his king some room because of these bishops. White seeks to open lines on the king side with h4. After knight c8, white plays d5 check. Then pawn takes c7. This not only allows white's bishop to reach its full potential, but now the knight can jump to d5 with tempo. The other white knight wants to join in on the action too, and begins a maneuver towards d4. Black plays rook a6 in order to defend his king side a little bit more, and the knight jumps to d4, attacking the queen. She drops back to d7, making rook a to d1 look all the more powerful. Knight e7 brings more pieces to the king's aid. Now white has one move that's by far the strongest, and it involves taking advantage of the rook being lined up with the queen. The move is knight f3. This lines up the threat of knight f6, which would win the queen. Black must meet this threat by moving the queen. Then knight g5 check. The king can't move because of black's formidable bishops. So black's forced to take the knight, opening up the h-file, which I'll admit is just as bad. King g7 is met with bishop d4, and king f7 is followed by knight c7 double check. And you might think this wins the queen, but no. Black resigns because checkmate is inevitable. In this one, Steinitz takes on Nxe4, and finally we see black accept the Vienna Gambit. As a result, black has surrendered control of the center, and white immediately occupies it with a pawn duo. Black could play queen h4 to stop white from castling, but opts for g5 instead to hold on to this extra pawn. White challenges the pawn chain with h4, which is defended by bishop e7. White captures it, and black recaptures with the bishop. Then knight f3 develops while putting some pressure on that bishop. Black doesn't want to move it, since it would give up the f4 pawn. So he plays d6 instead, planning to bring out his other bishop. Now Steinitz plays g3, exploiting the pin on the f4 pawn. Bishop g4 comes next, pinning the knight to the queen. White grabs the f4 pawn, and instead of recapturing, black takes the knight on f3, forcing white to recapture, and black's idea was to remove both defenders of the d4 pawn, and knight takes d4 comes with tempo. After queen d3, 2 of black's pieces are hanging, but luckily he has bishop h4 check, and after the king sidesteps, he can play c5, saving both of his pieces. At this point, black is up 1 pawn, and both kings are still in the center. However, you can argue that white has more control over the center and slightly more active pieces. And with the position mostly open, white's bishop pair could come in handy. On top of that, knight d5 is a great outpost square, and the threat is to take the bishop on h4 and then play knight c7. So black retreats the bishop, and white continues c3, kicking away black's best piece. Steinitz plays rook g1, putting the rook on a fully open file. At this point, black should challenge white's dominant knight. It can't be done with the g knight because you'd lose the bishop. So black should play knight c to e7, but this is a hard move to see. Instead, black chooses to develop his other knight, and a3 is the only possible square. This allows white to reroute the queen to h3 with tempo. The light square bishop has more scope, and the knight can't really be saved unless it retreats, but black doesn't want to do that. Black chooses to play rook g8, trying to trade off some pieces. Now white has one move stronger than the rest. It's not to trade rooks because that would just ease the pressure off black. Steinitz plays queen h6, dropping the rook, but he's also attacking the bishop twice, and he can take it with check. King e7 is the only move. Then white is cool, calm, and collected as he plays king e1 to defend his bishop. Queen f8 tries to trade queens, but Steinitz wants none of that. Knight d5 check is followed by queen h3 check. After king e8, white continues bishop e3, developing with tempo. Black plays rook g6 to defend the 6th rank, but then this allows f5 and the rook is forced all the way back. Rook d1 is next, bringing the final piece into the attack. And now the threat is to take on c5, which could open up some potential discovered attacks on the king. Black plays b6 to defend. Steinitz continues bishop f4, hitting the base of the pawn chain. King c8 tries to set up the great escape, but white's pieces begin to swarm the king. Bishop a6 check, king b8, and queen takes h7. This prepares to take the d-pawn, deflecting the queen away from the defense of the rook. Black plays rook g1 check, and after king f2, wins the rook. What's the deal? Did Steinitz miss something? No. Queen takes f7, sacrificing the queen. If black takes, then bishop d6 is an unstoppable checkmate. Black plays rook d2 check, but after king e3, there are no more checks. So he plays queen d6, keeping an eye on d6. And here's another one of those weird moments. Steinitz has queen b7 checkmate, and there's no way the first world chess champion didn't see a mate in one. But for some reason, he didn't play it, and I guess this follows the mantra of if you see mate in one, look for better. Bishop takes d6. Only after queen takes d6 does Steinitz play bishop b7 checkmate. Next, we're diving into this fascinating game between Steinitz and the English chess master Herbert Trenchard. In this one, Trenchard plays d5 on move 3, and Steinitz continues with his preferred d3, maintaining the tension. Black plays d4, gaining space and kicking the knight back to e2. Then we see knight to c6 and knight to f6 fighting for the control of the e5 square. Black plays bishop d6, defending again, then c3 trying to break down black's pawn center. Black can't support his central pawns easily, so he decides to take on c3. Then, to avoid giving white the opportunity of pushing forward in the center with tempo, he takes on f4. White takes with the knight, trying to preserve his bishop pair, and despite black being ahead in development, white has good control of the center. Black castles, and white plays bishop e2, preparing to do the same. We see rook e8 and white castles. Black continues with b6, looking to develop the bishop in the other direction. White plays queen e2, maneuvering his queen towards the king side. Bishop a6 targets the weak d3 pawn. Steinitz continues with knight g5, just probing on the king side. He has ideas of going knight to h5 and queen h4. Black plays knight e5, adding another attacker to d3, but d4 is a move Steinitz wanted to play eventually anyway. Black is just bringing it about sooner rather than later. So black exchanges the bishops, then plays h6 to kick the knight. We could have seen several pawn captures, but Steinitz prefers to retreat the knight instead and keep more pieces on the board. Black's knight also retreats, and Steinitz pushes forward with d5, forking the knight and the bishop. Neither can be taken, however, because of the pin. So black saves his bishop, and after queen f4, targeting f7, saves his knight as well. Now Steinitz displays his tactical prowess, beginning with knight g6. This opens up an attack on f7, and stops any piece from going to e7 to try to defend it. If rook to e6, then white would have knight f4, and black's in a whole lot of trouble. So black plays king h7, since he might as well get out of check in advance. Steinitz takes the f7 pawn, and black tries to maintain equality by taking the c3 pawn. Then bishop h6, using the pin, and threatening to take on f8 and deliver checkmate. Black throws in knight e2 check before taking on h6. We see rook h5, which doesn't appear to have a threat, but it does. After black takes on d4, white plays rook to h5. The king is forced to capture, and Steinitz delivers the coup de grace, knight g to f4. Black resigns, since wherever the king goes, Queen h5 is checkmate. The final game is not only the shortest one, it is the most prestigious one. Wilhelm Steinitz faces Johann Zucker's during the first World Chess Championship in 1886. Black accepts the gambit, and Steinitz takes the opportunity to grab the center. Black does not sit back, he challenges the center with d5. But that's a free pawn, so white just takes it. Black continues with queen h4 check, which white sidesteps. Then queen e7 check, king f2, and queen h4 check again. Now Steinitz blocks with g3, and after pawn takes g3, he does not recapture, because that would hang the rook. He plays king to g2. So white's king is safe for now, but black can win the d-pawn. White plays pawn takes g3, opening up a discovered attack on the queen. Queen g4 tries to trade queens, which would be in black's favor, so white avoids it with queen e1 check. We see bishop e7, then bishop d3 defending the c2 pawn, since the knight was attacking it. Now white is threatening rook to h4, which would win the knight with the skewer. The best way for black to stop this would be to move the king so that the bishop is no longer pinned. Instead, black plays knight f5. The problem with this move is that the king is still in the center and black's pieces are just not in sync. For example, the knight is in the way of the queen, giving it one less diagonal to use. White develops his knight. Black continues bishop d7, preparing to castle queenside. Then bishop f4 develops and defends g3, giving the queen some more freedom. It also cuts off more squares from the queen. And if black were to castle here, then knight e5 actually completely traps the queen. So black plays f6. Then white plays knight e4, centralizing the knight, but also opening this diagonal for the queen, so that if black castled, queen a5 would be devastating. Instead, black plays knight h6, and here's the critical moment. White has a tactic to win. Can you find it? So the idea is that knight f6 would be a royal fork, but the g-pawn can just take it. So Steinitz simply captures twice on h6. Then the knockout blow, knight takes f6, using that pin on the bishop. After white wins the queen, black resigns. I hope these games were both entertaining and instructive. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more chess content.